Hello, my friends, and it's so good to see you again through this format. I'm going to bring back story time with Miss Grace, and I'll be doing one book a week, usually about an artist of interest, preferably from the BIPOC community, so Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, either an artist or an author, and then other stories also about identity and accepting who you are. So the first book I'm going to read to you today was loaned to me by my neighbors, and they are Ruby and Clara, who I also get to teach at school, so I'm really grateful for them sharing this story with me. I did not know much about this artist before reading the book, and I think you'll really enjoy the story as there's a lot of overlay in what's happening today in our world. So the story, this is the cover of the book, is It Began with a Page, How Gyo Fujikawa Drew the Way. Okay, I think you're gonna enjoy it. And this is the cover of the book without it, little cute little chubby babies on it, and on the back with a little kitty. The book is written by Kyo MacLear, and pictures, the illustration is by Julie Morstad. Okay, here we go. Back to our reading adventures. It began with a page, bright and beckoning. It began with a mother writing a poem and a father working a field and a little girl named Gyo drawing a picture. It was 1913 and Gyo was 5 years old. So we see Gyo here coloring or drawing as her mother is writing. And Dad is off to work off the page. That morning, her mama said, "Ohayo, sleepyhead. It's going to be a busy day." And it was. And you can see all the things she did that day. And I've been lucky to travel to Japan, and I can say that I know Ohio means good morning. So an even more polite way to say good morning is Ohayo gozaimashita. I probably butchered that pronunciation, but it's very close. But Ohio, it kind of sounds like the state Ohio, but spelled differently. Right until nightfall, Mama's friends had come, and they were full of talk. Gyo held her rice bowl and listened with curious ears. Did Gyo know what she wanted to be? Not yet. So how many 5-year-olds know what they want to be? I didn't know when I was 5, but I knew pretty soon thereafter that teaching was the way to go for me. But 5, I think I just wanted to have fun, eat candy, and play. And we can see the women speaking. We sailed to America with our best kimono to see what we could be. So that's why she's wondering, what can I be? Such disappointment. We need the vote. We need rights. Speaking of voting, that's coming up. Make sure your parents are voting. What she did know was that she liked to draw. Me too. She loved the feel of the pencil in her hand, the dance and glide of a line, how a new color could change everything. A bright splash of yellow, a sleepy stroke of blue. Every day she started with an empty white page and filled it with pictures. Look at all those pictures. 1 page a day, that would be a great challenge for you guys, wouldn't it? 1 page a day. At home, surrounded by drawing tools and books, anything was possible. But at school, Gyo didn't feel that way. You can see Gyo, she's looking a little sad. At school, no one said, "That girl sure can draw." No one noticed her color pencils or box of paints. No one even noticed when she moved away. I can relate to that. I moved back and forth a lot as a little girl from Georgia to South Carolina, and I don't think my friends noticed when I was gone. Gio's new home was a fishing village near San Pedro, California, a haven for Japanese Americans, a new life. Roaming with her friends, Gio felt weightless and free. So in San Pedro, she was able to find some friends, and there you see them hanging up Japanese carp kites, which is a traditional type of kite that Japanese children would make, especially on the day they celebrate children. They have a Children's Day, just like you have Mother's Day and Father's Day here. They have a Children's Day. I think it's in June. A ferry ride away at her high school, Gio sometimes still felt invisible among her mostly white classmates. So you see her standing there, her classmates off to the side, her in high school. But her drawings caught the attention of two teachers. Who was this girl whose eyes missed nothing, who could sketch rivers and boats and birds like a dream? Miss Cole and Miss Blum saw the energy in each line of her drawings. Gio was too poor to go to art school, but Miss Cole found money to pay her way. That is super awesome. I wonder if they were her art teachers. It doesn't say. So now Gio's off to art school. Gio was nervous to leave her home for the buzz and bustle of downtown Los Angeles. Wow. Not many girls, and even fewer Asian American girls, went to college in 1926. That was a long time ago. It's right after women got the right to vote in 1920. So a lot of women still didn't have, weren't really accepted in these types of roles that weren't a housewife. But Gio was determined. She sketched statues, flowers, and faces. Her sketchbook filled up one after the other. One of my favorite things is to have a full sketchbook one after the other, and they're just bursting with drawings. And here we see her drawing a figure, and it's wearing like a green robe, so it kind of makes me think of the Statue of Liberty, but I'm not sure if that's what she's supposed to be drawing because the other guys are there too. And I know that the Statue of Liberty is in New York, and she is in California. Hungry to know more, Gio set off for Japan, the land of her ancestors, to study traditional Japanese brush painting, which, by the way, is called sumi-e. But the teachers were full of rules. And as you can see here, the teacher's showing her how to hold the brush, and there's so many ways that you have to hold the brush to make the letters and the marks. So it's definitely really kind of strict way of doing art. And guess what? She wasn't into it. So instead, she traveled around the country doing her own learning. Wood blocks, carving tools, ink made of soot, which is type of like the residual dust and powder from a fire. Ash. I don't know why I couldn't think of that word. She lost herself in the prints of Hiroshige, Utamaro, and Hakusai. And some of my students might recall Hakusai, who's a printmaker, and this is looking very similar to one of his prints with Mount Fuji in the background. And floated in a beautiful sea of kimono. And kimono are the traditional sort of robes or dresses that Japanese women would wear. And they're made of really beautiful fabric with delicate patterns. And the belt they wear around the waist is actually called an obi. And as you can see here, there's a very particular way of folding that belt, that obi. It's quite complicated. I've tried to do it myself. Travel fed her dreams, but back in America, it was time to earn money. For the next few years, Gio worked long days painting murals and drawing for magazines. In 1941, she was offered a temporary job designing books at Walt Disney Studio in New York, a city filled with art and artists. It was hard for Gio to leave her family, especially her mother. Little did she know that things were about to get harder still. Oh no, I don't want things to get harder for our friend Gio. She's had a hard time. So that picture tells me maybe something bad's about to happen. In early 1942, terrible things were happening. Bombs and gunfire rocked the world. America was at war with Japan. Gio was shocked to discover that anyone who looked Japanese or had a Japanese name was now suspected of being the enemy. Japanese Americans living on the West Coast were ordered to leave their homes, their schools, their pets, their everything. So you can see a Japanese family with all their belongings packed up. So Gio was on the East Coast. She was in New York, but her family was on the West Coast. So you can imagine her family was called to leave their homes. Gio, along with others living on the East Coast, was told to stay where she was. On the West Coast, families preparing to leave tried to sell their belongings like cars and furniture to junk dealers, but they were offered only pennies. "I won't sell," said Gio's mother. Instead, she set everything ablaze. It's really sad. She didn't want anybody else to have her belongings, especially just for pennies, so she'd rather set it on fire. Gio's family was sent to a prison camp far, far away from their home. Gio's heart was broken. So at this time, similar to when the Nazis had the concentration camps, there were Japanese American internment camps, but it was really a type of prison to hold them. And multiple families were housed in a unit, and bunk beds and all that. Very little food, very little freedom. They're fenced in. As you can see, there's the guard tower. So it wasn't a good moment in our history for America to do this just because they looked one way. We thought they were the enemy when they weren't. They moved here for a better life, and that's what we did. For the next 3 years, the world shrank. It became tiny and terrible. Now when she gazed at a white page, no pictures would come. I imagine it's hard to make art when you're that sad. Gio mailed her family letters and sent gifts for her new nephew, born in the camp. But her heart would not mend. You can see her family and the new baby reading the letter. Eventually, Gio began to draw again. She drew to keep her worries still and to save money her family would need. When angry strangers saw her as the enemy, drawing comforted her. When the world felt gray, color lifted her. She wondered, could art comfort and lift others too? I think so. So she kind of pushed through her sadness thanks to art, and it helped lift her spirits to make colorful pictures. When the war ended, the Fujikawas were released. With no house or savings to call their own, they had to start again. For Gio, the next 15 years passed swiftly. There were stamps to create, store windows to decorate, a children's book of poetry to illustrate. There were 2 poodles who needed loving. Now when Gio walked around the city collecting ideas for her pictures, she began to notice little changes around her. And if you see here, sorry about that, let's see if I can focus. There is a march or a protest happening, and it's saying things like segregation is wrong. We walk for human dignity. In segregation now. So this was happening during the civil rights movement. So she went from seeing and experiencing a war to the civil rights movement. So she's seeing those changes happening and people making change in a good way. Still, there was so much that hadn't changed. At the library and bookshop, it was the same old stories, mothers in aprons and fathers with pipes and a world of only white children. Gio knew a book could hold more and do more. A book, she told her poodles, can be anything that anyone imagines it to be. Gio knew what she wanted to do. Every day, she started with an empty page and filled it with pictures and words. When her book was done, she gave it to a publisher. And what did they see? Babies! Babies, babies, babies! Chubby-cheeked, squat-legged, bouncy-bottomed babies. Naughty, nice, oh-so-busy, toddle-crawling babies. But the publisher said no. No to mixing white babies and black babies. It was not done in the early 1960s America, a country with laws that separated people by skin color. Not good. But Gio would not budge. She's gonna hold her ground. She closed her eyes and remembered all the times she had felt unseen and unwelcome, like in elementary and high school and even at college, I'd say. And even walking down the street when strangers would be angry at her just because she is Asian American and they thought that all Japanese people were the enemy when in fact they're not. Ugh. So she thought about that. That actually gave her strength, that experience. She looked the publisher in the eye and said, "It shouldn't be that way. Not out there in the streets, not on here on this page. We need to break the rules." Then she waited for them to rethink their decision. The babies waited too, and waited. But babies cannot wait. Look at the baby turning the page. Finally, the publisher said yes, and the book did well, very well. Babies loved it. So Gio kept going, welcoming kids in from the edges, as you see here, from the corners, as you see there, from the shadows. Gio let each child find a place, girls and boys, freed from pink or blue, sharing jokes, joys, mishaps, and bruises, all sprawling out across the bright page, ready for a bigger, better world. The end. So I think Gio worked hard to change the rules in the books at the time to make sure that all kinds of children were represented. So she was very much pivotal in making that happen. And I mentioned earlier, I see similarities in this book to what's happening in our world today. And to me, that makes me think about how people will look at the color of someone and just think that because they're that color, they are bad or good or some other association, when that has nothing to do with it. It has to do with who you are inside, whether you're good or bad, not your skin color. So Gio felt that back in the 20s up into the 60s, and probably even thereafter. And it's still unfortunately happening. So like she said in her, or like the author said in the book, the world changed, but sometimes not everything changed. And I think that we might be seeing that now. So it's up to you, my young readers, to make sure you understand and that you appreciate one another, not based on this color, but based on what's in here. And I wouldn't be an art teacher if I didn't end this with an art challenge or some sort of art directive. So like Gio, I wonder if you can fill a page, a white page, every inch of it, fill the whole thing in one day with your drawings. Doesn't matter, draw everything you see. Draw the bouquet of flowers in front of you. Draw your water bottle, draw your glasses, draw the mouse. Give it mouse ears. Have some fun with it. Don't be afraid, because the only way you're going to get better is if you keep trying. And if it doesn't look like it, nobody cares. Draw it the way you see it and let the world know how you see things. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I'll see you next week.